Rightio, it's time to move on to the moment that we've all been waiting for. It's time to analyse and just have a little look at both of these reports. So I've got the Dream one here. So this was published by the Speedrunning team. So yeah, let's have a look. I have the ability to highlight, so I'll highlight anything, sort of make notes, that sort of thing, and bring you back in when anything interesting occurs or any discrepancies. Okay, so we're going to start off with what looks to be the mechanics, and this is obviously my first ever look at this. So they're saying essentially what the mechanics of the game is here. So okay, so they're saying that ender pearls can be obtained in several ways, but the fastest is my mouse. I actually think my mouse has just run out of battery. That is marginally comical. I can't even stop the recording. Oh, whatever. Just carry on. Oh, what a disaster. Okay, mouse has been fixed. Didn't think that would happen, but anyway. But the fastest is to use the mechanic known as bartering. Okay, so basically that's what I was talking about earlier. In bartering, a play exchanges gold, ingots with a piglin, humanoid, blah blah blah, for a randomly chosen item or group of items. For each barter, there is about a 5% chance in 1.16.1. The piglin will give an ender pearl. Now that there is very, very important. So when we go forward, we need to always remember that it's 5% supposedly on average. I may look into that, see if it actually is. If it's any different, I'll probably flash it up on the screen now. Yeah, and the other thing they talk about is the blaze rods. So you need about 6 or 7. So it's a 50% chance of dropping one blaze rod. Okay, people also keep that in mind. I'm not focusing on blaze rods, but as it's here, we might as well have a look. Now, this is interesting. So they talk about motivation here. But the thing is, this was brought up on Dream's video as well when I watched that. They only use 6 consecutive live streams. Now, this is quite a big problem because, well, think about it. It's only 6. Like, what happened to all the other ones? Which means if you pick the 6 most luckiest ones, then of course that's going to skew the data in some weird way. 42 of the 262 piglin barters performed throughout the streams yielded ender pearls, and 211 of the 305. Well, to be honest, 211 is 2/3 essentially. That's not outrageous. I must admit that's for me that particularly doesn't stand out as something that is like 211 out of 305. Mathematically, that's not improbable at all, actually. And 42 of 262. Right, I'm just whipping out my calculator. Flex on you all. If we do 42 over 262, that is 16%, which, that, to be fair, that is three times larger. So fair enough, I guess. Okay, so they've clearly done some form of research into this, some form of what's the word? Not research. Come on. So they've clearly done some kind of survey with this, as they've quoted using both Illumina, Benix, Sizzler, and him, Vadicus. I hope I'm saying that right. Which is probably the way to go. Is you've always got to compare and contrast between different streamers and their different drops and different things. But just remember, just because it doesn't happen, or just because it's really unlikely to happen, doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Okay, so now they're talking about objectivity. So this document are solely motivated by the presence of exceptional empirical data, and that any runner, regardless of popularity, following, or skill observed experiencing such unlikely events, would be held to the same level of scrutiny. I don't think so, to be honest. If it was anybody else, I don't think they would. But that's just my opinion, and maybe a bit irrelevant. Okay. These corrections inherently skew the analysis in Dream's favour. Okay. We aim to calculate not the exact probability that this streak of luck occurred if Dream is innocent, but the upper bound of the probability. That is, we will arrive at a value which we are certain is greater than the true probability. Okay, here we go. Let's get into the mathematics of this whole thing. So they're trying to look for not what the exact is, but they're looking for a range of values, which is certainly an interesting way to do it, because that could exaggerate the data completely. Because if you've got something that is, for instance, let's say there's a 5% chance of something happening, and then you get it like 1 in 100, so it becomes 10%. Like, and the range could skew that, because if the range is then between 1 in 50 to 1 in 200, what do you do then? Do you take the middle value, or do you take the furthest value, even though the actual value is 1 out of 100? So this is where things start to get a little bit skewed. Okay, so this is probably the most interesting part, and probably most mathematically heavy. We're going to look at the data, which is going to be very important when we go to look at the second one, because that'll be countering this. Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, so we're looking at luck, but luck is Dreams Pearl Barter charted. I'm looking here at figure 1. Highlight it. Dreams Pearl Barter is charted alongside various comparisons. The 99.9th percentile line represents a 1 in 1,000 luck. So what is it? Not necessarily. It could be 1 in 100. I disagree with that. I think maybe, which is already quite unlikely, if not necessary, proof of anything. Okay. Well, let me just have a look at this a minute. So, with this, I'll get my pencil out. So this green line here that I'm drawing this terrible circle around, this green line is supposedly basically 0.1% of people will be above that line. That's the idea of the luck. 0.1 is 1 in 1,000, yeah. So that's 1 in 1,000. Oh, that looks terrible. So this green line here is 1 in 1,000, which is quite unlikely. But as you can see, Dreams is supposedly way above that. Although to be honest, see what the problem is here is this bit that's getting me down here. If you can just see there, is that it does actually go below the 99th. So this is what makes me feel like there is some kind of truth behind this, because it's not like they've just sort of smacked it up, there it is, but they've just sort of thought about this and they have plotted this properly. But as you can see, it seems to have this 1 in 1,000 luck here, and then it sort of curtails into lunacy. But hang on, but then there's something here. Back up here, it said that we had four other streamers: Illumina, Benix, Sizzler, and Vadicus. But on the data, we've only got Illumina and the expected. So the expected is what? Is 5%. That's what it is. So, where are the others? Like, where are the other streamers that you quote unquote surveyed? Come on. If you're going to say this in your introduction, in your summary, I need to at least see them instead of just putting what could be. The problem is with this now is that I have to assume that Illumina's is the least lucky, because they're going to try and exaggerate. There's always going to be a bias against Dream, which makes me feel like this Illumina's is actually the lowest of the 4, so that's why they've put that on instead of putting on all 4. So, like, where we need the other 3 for this graph to like properly make sense, and so we can get a good idea. And also you need more data than just 6 streams, because there could be one stream with outrageous luck and then one with no luck. But the problem is that outrageous luck is going to skew everything. Like, it's just going to create such a difference in the just overall statistics of the thing. Okay, now this is the Blaze Rod one, which is 50%. So, this yellow line is 50%. And again, they've only got Illumina on here, which is also interesting, because surely Blaze Rods would be so much easier. The thing is with this is that why don't they just do it themselves? So you could easily just get somebody just to find an average by just sitting with some piglins and just seeing what drops, counting how many drops there are. Like, you could easily do that just by booting up a normal world, so you know that it's unbiased because you did it, and you would move more of a primary source, which is again it's unbiased and is much better. And I would believe it more if there was somebody who had actually, part of the moderating team actually were part of this as well. So if they had their own data, which would be much better than just ripping them from other streamers. They just need to sit down and just, for instance, just kill 300 blazes just to see how many rods they get. And then from there they can apply it to this to see really just how skewed or how wrong this whole graph looks. But again, you can see that Dream's luck here, it's not like it does sort of like this and then goes up like that. As you can see, it flatlines, which makes me feel like it's more legit. Because surely if it was skewed then, or adjusted in some way, then surely you would make it so it's like this, so you get the luck all the time, not just some of the time. Which this, I've got to be honest, makes it more credible towards Dream for me, because that shows actually that either he's coded this incredibly complex like algorithm to do it only sometimes, which I doubt, to be honest, because who would go to all that trouble, even like the great Dream of all people. And also this, it adds the believability to Dream, because it shows that he was also less lucky than what they say and less than a 99th percentile, which is also really important. Let's move on. So what I'd want to see from both of these graphs really would be more data from more streamers, and I'd also like to see some of the moderators' own sort of primary data. So I want them to collect data themselves. So we want to see like what drops they get or that sort of thing. That's what I would really like to see, because that would make me feel much better, to be honest, because I'm leaning towards Dream at this point, because there's evidence here to suggest that he is legit at the moment. This data is really underwhelming, I must admit. Okay, so the next bit is going to be a description of every aspect of our investigation in an accessible manner, which means it's probably terrible. Okay, so more maths. We will begin with an introduction to the binomial distribution and the following adjustments to the account and sample bias and other biases lowering the accuracy of the binomial distribution. Okay. Now, it'd be rather interesting to see what Dream's fella does, because I know he got in at a mathematical expert. So it'd be really interesting to see what distribution he uses, because binomial does have its limitations. I think, from what I can remember from the video, I think he says it was done by the normal distribution, which I have to say is probably better, for instance. So I'll just briefly explain my knowledge of this. So the normal distribution allows you to do certain bounds and certain areas, whereas the binomial distribution doesn't really allow you to do that. So you can sort of find the area above that, or the probability of finding something that is above the 99.9th percentile if you're doing the normal, whereas binomial is more is linear. It's more linear. It's not, but it's kind of hard to explain. It's just understand that the normal distribution in this case would probably be better than binomial distribution. My voice. Okay, I think this line was written for me. To strengthen our analysis so the skeptical reader, that's me, we now preemptively address expected criticisms and questions. Okay, this is good. Okay, so I think they're about to justify yourself. Why are you not analysing all of Dream's runs? Does that not introduce sample bias? And they immediately say yes. So they're clearly admitting to the fact that there is a sample bias, which is it's not a strong argument. Let's just say that. There is clearly sample bias in the data set, but its presence does not invalidate our analysis. Sample bias is a common problem in real-world statistical analysis. It is. So if it were possible to account for, then every analysis of empirical data would be biased and useless. Okay. So, and then it goes on about flipping a coin. Essentially, if you flip it 100 times, you're supposed to get 50-50. So you're supposed to get 50 and 50, and that's what they're trying to say, is that in fact this doesn't make any sense. Okay, so essentially sample bias is that the idea that the sample that you're taking is limited in some way. So it is, for instance, this is taking only 6 of Dream's runs incorporates a sample bias, because you're only introducing 6, whereas he's probably done 50, 60 streams with hundreds of runs. Like, That's what sample bias is. It's sort of taking a data set and saying, we're not going to use all of it. We're only going to use the bits that we want. And then that will introduce sample bias. I'm not suggesting at all that that's what they did. Not they picked the 6 luckiest ones, like, because that would be complete disrespect towards this whole situation. So it's just, they needed to take more runs into consideration, because the more runs you take, the smaller the sample bias is. So there will always be some form of bias, intentional or unintentional. So this is just something we have to accept in statistical analysis. So let's just move on. Okay, so I've just put the... So essentially, we're on to the core mathematics here, which is the binomial distribution. And I have actually just checked the maths, particularly for this. And it does check out. I've done it 2 different ways, because my calculator, which is a class which is not sponsored by Casio, uh, it allows me to do it in 2 different ways. So they've used the non-discrete, so essentially they've done the discrete version of the binomial, what we call binomial PD, not binomial CD. CD is for non-discrete data, so stuff that's continuous. So what they've done is that they've essentially set their n to 10, x to 6, and p to 0.5p being the probability. And then they've done some calculation. This is how to write out by hand, but my calculator is amazing and does it for me. And I do concur with what they get. But now that I've thought about it, why would they be doing PD? Why not CD? Because surely it'd be more interesting to see how many he gets in a row, be more continuous data, although you could model it as discrete. Oh, this is getting more complicated. Okay, this is just more generalization. This is when it says NK, basically that's NCK. So basically Pascal's triangle, I'll get it up. Yeah, so here we are. So basically this is what it is. It's Pascal's triangle, and so essentially if we wanted 10C6, we would go down to the 10th row, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it'd be this row, and it'd be the 6th one along. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it'd be 126 would be our value, just to say that's where they get that value from. It's from this Pascal's triangle. So essentially what it is, you start off with 1, and then you build your way down, and essentially these two numbers must add up to make this one, essentially. That's what it is. So the outside ones will always be 1, and the inside ones will always be the sum of the two that are above it. That was unnecessarily complex and is probably rubbish, but I hope this is somewhat understanding of what's going on behind the mathematics of it. So I've tried my best. This is more generalization. Okay. Oh, yes, mate. Here we go. Cumulative distribution. This is CD. So they have used CD, which is interesting. What they've done here. Set 10, 6. Okay, so this is what I was saying earlier, and they've actually mentioned it here, and that is addressing the bias. There are a few assumptions that of the binomial distribution that are violated in this sample, some of which were noted in the document by Dream. We'll get on to that in a bit. This section accounts for these violated assumptions and proofs computations that accounts for these biases. Note that some of these biases only apply to pearls, as blaze rods were examined in the same streams as pearls due to pearl odds, which are blah blah blah. Basically, they know that there is flaws to this whole thing, so let's just have a look. Okay, this is supposedly what they've done to fix the bias. Now, what actually does this mean? So, saying probability of n is less than or equal to 1. Yeah, has to be. Minus the 1 minus the probability. So, what we would have calculated of n plus 1 over 2. Okay, so n is our number of I do apologise of me I'm just trying to think about what they've actually said. So n is the number of, so essentially n is our total proportion, but why? Why have they done this? N is the total, so if we had 300, then n would be our 300, and let's say 150 were pearls. Interesting. This is certainly an odd way of doing it. Though I think it does. I'd have to. Also, what is this name? Shifty Sam. You've not picked a good name there, have you? But anyway, it's just. I'd have to look at some of the data for this, because I just don't know if this works, which is the key thing. That's my problem. I just don't know. Hmm. Okay, so I do apologize for that. I just noticed that my audio was way high. It was far too loud, so I do apologize if the audio seems a bit scuffed in any part of the first bit, but I think I've sorted it now, so it should be fine. And I didn't want to re-record it because I really wanted just to give my full, just sort of first impressions of this, but hopefully it's all out of the way now, so hopefully audio should be fine, everything should be good, and let's carry on. And I'm looking at probabilities here. So the chance of rolling either a 2 or a 5 on a 6-sided dice is 2 out of 6. Yep, 1/3, I agree with that. Because, oh, hold on. Yeah, adding a 2 or a 5, so essentially you're going for 2 out of the 6, which is, yeah, that's fine. They are not mutually exclusive events. No, they're not. Basically, that means you would multiply them. Consider the chance of rolling either a number less than 3 or an even number. Rolling a number less than 3, 1 or 2, is 2 out of 6. And the chance of rolling an even number is 2, 4 or 6 is 3 out of 6. Adding these together would produce you 5 out of 6. Well, yes, because the only number you wouldn't have is 3. Or 5. Hold on, but that doesn't make any sense. Oh, I know why. It's because you can get 2 twice. Oh, higher probability. Oh. The problem is that why would you do that to begin with? That seems such a stupid way to do it. Why not? When you're looking at things like this, we're not supposed to be adding them together. When you're finding a probability of this, you don't add them on, you multiply them. You multiply them in order to get the true probability. So I don't know why you'd be entirely adding to begin with. So we should be multiplying. Ugh, this double counting problem is the reason why adding together fails for probabilities that are not mutually exclusive. So it's a problem that probabilities are not mutually exclusive. Yeah, but they should be multiplied. They are independent of each other. That's the thing with this, is that they are independent, which is key, which means we can just start. Why are you adding? It doesn't make any sense. You should be multiplying, because then that would give you the true probability. Otherwise, then you start introducing double counting, for instance, and you'll end up with a probability that's 7 over 6, and that's impossible. So, like, ugh. The sum of the probabilities, and I'm shouting again, so the audio is going to sound really scuffed. But anyway, the sum of the probabilities will still work as an upper bound. Oh, we're still looking for upper bounds. Ah! Look for the value. You're essentially looking for the highest value and the lowest value, which means you're looking for a range. You want the exact value. Thus, we have following K, so that'll be whatever the footnote is for K, where pH is the p-value corrected for H comparisons, and P is the initial p-value. So pH must be less than or equal to the probability of big H. That's not necessarily true. It could be lower. Could it be lower? Could you have pH being bigger? You could. I could throw out some interesting things here, because this here could throw up some rather interesting things, as there could be an event where you could actually get pH, as in this one, actually being greater than this one. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there could be one that could happen. That could happen. We will choose values for this formula to compute the final result in part 4. However, to ensure these computations are not invalid, so valid, while using a double negative, due to the unusual behavior of Minecraft's random number generation, we will first analyze Minecraft's code. Oh, I'm gonna be here till... Oh, I've already been doing this for 40 minutes. I'm already fed up. But anyway, this sentence here really worries me, because if you choose values, you introduce bias again, which is never good when you talk about statistical measure. You should never introduce bias in any way. You should always choose something that's either randomly generated or generated through data. So, for instance, pick some random numbers in your set of data, or let the data decide, so the most prominent, or these sort of things. They've got to be generated by the data, not by you. Ugh, you're going to cause more problems than you're going to solve, to be honest. Oh no, not code. Okay, so this is their item weight for the 1.16.1 piglin bartering, which is interesting. So you can see that they have a weight of 20. So, for instance, getting an ender pearl is 4 times more likely than getting a book. I assume that's an enchanted book. So that's what that means. And then obviously getting crying obsidian is twice as likely as getting an ender pearl. So, and then from there it would be whatever it would be. Since the sum weights add up to 423, yeah, I will probably not check that. And ender pearls have a weight of 20. The probability of an ender pearl during a BART is 20 out of 423. Now, what percentage is that? That looks about 5% to me, which would make sense, to be honest. 423. It's less than 5. It's less than 5%. It's about 4.7% in total. So that's... Oh no, no one to code. I'm rubbish at this. Oh dear, what is this? Oh, I don't like this at all. I want to ignore it. I've been recommended to read this, but I don't care. Let's just go all in. Oh, it's Wikipedia. Oh no, can't be trusted. Okay, so they're saying that seed n plus 1, so the seed that comes after so essentially seed 2, is equal to a times seed n, so that'll be the first seed, plus b times mod m, so the modulus of m, so therefore it'll always be positive, no matter what. Okay, so in the case of Java's the constants a, b, and m in the equation are given by these numbers. Note that the constants are specific to Java, will vary on implementation. Okay. So essentially they just substitute in. I don't really know what this achieves, or what this wants to achieve. Okay. Okay, this is an interesting fact. So empirical evidence shows that the world RNG is called 6,000 to 9,000 times per ticks. That's 60 frames per second. So essentially, that's 6,000 times per one frame. That's what that means in the Nether. Okay, interesting. This value may depend on render distance and what is present to given chunks. So if there's a piglin or not, or if there's ancient debris, I think. But it should never come close to 2 to the power of 18 calls in a natural setting. Okay. This means that even in the best possible case, you could only expect a period to complete in around about 30 ticks. Okay, interesting. Interesting. So that's 30 frames. That's half a second if you're playing at 60 FPS. Okay, so this is okay. No. This is the interesting bit. Okay, here we go. So this is the results for. Oh, they've called it a naive estimate. That's not good to begin with. That's not filling me with confidence. Okay, so the initial computations performed by community members directly applied to the binomial distribution without considering biases present in the data. To reiterate, what follows are naive estimations operating under faulty assumptions that we have spent entire paper accounting for. Okay. So in order to keep this, we need to keep things properly. We have to interpret these things properly and keep in mind all the inaccuracies that have been mentioned before. So the probability of getting 42 or more than 42 pearls and 262. The K is 42. Okay, so they've done a series here, so they've used this. Okay, so basically what they've done is they've calculated the probability for getting the pearls that he did and the probability of getting the rods, and then they've slapped them together, which is not a good idea. Why would you do that? So essentially what you're doing is you're putting two, which you've already said they're not mutually exclusive, and then you're slapping them together like they are mutually exclusive. That's why you've got such a ridiculously small number. It's because you've... This seems unnecessarily biased to me, and this seems like a totally unnecessary sort of equation to do. It doesn't make any sense why they've done this. Not at all. Guess who forgot to push the record button? Me, which means I've just been speaking to myself for the last 15 minutes. I went through this last bit essentially and what it means, so I'll essentially summarize again. Can't believe I've been so stupid, but it doesn't matter. So essentially I'll just go through what I said again. So I just went through the conclusions saying essentially that the only sensible conclusion that can be drawn from this analysis is that Dream Game was modified in order to manipulate the pearl barter and rod drop rates. So essentially what they're saying is that in order for this to be possible, Dream had to modify it before going into the runs. So that's the conclusion they drawn from it. But my biggest problem is that the probability that the last thing you would have seen would have been the probabilities, because I forgot to record the last bit. But yeah, those probabilities, what they've done is they've multiplied them together, which doesn't really make sense to me, because the two events are mutually exclusive. You cannot multiply them because one event is not dependent on the other. They are completely independent of each other. Like, the probability of getting a blaze rod is not dependent on how many ender pearls you get from bartering. So why you would multiply them together doesn't really make sense. You should really add them together. Like, the number is still incredibly small, but it's not unfathomably small. Like what they say here, after accounting for contributors to bias likelihood of this occurring, it's still unfathomably small. Like, going from the power to minus 23 to the power of minus 12, possibly minus 11. That's still quite high, but that's still a lot better than what we have at the moment. And to be honest, I'm more edging towards a dream at this point, because this data is lacking incredibly. I know they address it, but the problem is that we need more data. You can't just address it and then not give us it. You see, if you give it to us and address it, fine, whatever. Like, okay, we need more data. So, for instance, we can have more, those 4 streamers that they said that they had a look at. We only got 1, we only got Illuminers. Why can't we have the other 3? Like, come on. And also, some primary data would be quite nice from some of the moderators doing it themselves. So, for instance, get a moderator to kill 300 blazes. See how many rods you get, simply. Just easily do this. Just spawn them in from spawn eggs even. Just that. Trade with piglins for half an hour. See what data you get. These sort of things will be invaluable and will make this a much stronger argument than it already is. Because at the moment, it's iffy. It really is really iffy. The probabilities are whack. And I don't know why they've added it. It doesn't make sense to me. Why would you multiply? You should have added those 2 final ones together, because they're not dependent on each other. But anyway, enough ranting about that. We've now done this one, and I think it's finally time to move on to Dream's response. So we're going to move on to the second report. So, without any further ado, let's get straight into it. Right, so here we are ready for round 2, as we are now going to look at the response for Dream. Now, this one is in a Google Doc, so I have some limited features, but I have zoomed in nicely for you, so you should be able to see, and we'll just have a quick look at this. Hopefully it won't take as long as the other one, because that one really took me forever. Okay, so let's start off with the executive summary. So, after noticing that the Minecraft speedrunner Dream had unusually good luck in a subset of live stream runs, the question arose whether he modified certain parts of the game. Determining the true odds of these lucky streaks after they occur requires detailed statistical analysis. Yes, this is true. Something that I went through in the previous one, all the faults that I thought I saw. The Minecraft speedrunning team produced an official report that claimed the highest possible odds of Dream speedrunning was 1 in 7.5 trillion, even when correcting for biases. Which, I have to agree with this person, seems totally unreasonable, as they multiplied their answers rather than added them, because I don't know why they did that, but they shouldn't have done that, in my opinion at least. So yeah, anyway. Commissioned by Dream, I perform a review of the original report and a second expert statistical analysis that I argue is more accurate. The odds are about 1 in 10 million. That is a small subset of any live stream speedruns from any player in the past year that would give a low probability if investigating 2 ways, blah 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 blah. 6 lucky streams are investigated. Now that's interesting, because I brought that up as well, is that they're being rather selective in their data collecting, which is a problem, because they've picked the 6 luckiest ones rather than just 6 random ones. So of course the luck is going to spike out of control, because it's the 6 luckiest. So I'm glad we're on the same page here. The higher odds in my analysis result from higher fidelity simulation of when speedrunners stop bartering, and an improved correction for some of the biases. If all 11 streams discussed are included, that's good. Then the low probability event are consistent with random chance. Deciding between these odds depends on external conditions, but it is much too extreme to state that there is a 1 in 7.5 trillion chance that Dream did not cheat. So from what I can gather from this is that whoever this person is, I don't think Dream actually tells us who it is, he's saying that essentially it's impossible. It's still quite low. I think he says 1 in 10 million somewhere. There it is, 1 in 10 million. But that's still considerably better than 1 in 7.5 trillion. And once more, he's using 11 of the speedruns rather than the 6 lucky streams. So he's using all 11 of the streams that Dream did. So that is, do you know what? This is already off to a better start than I thought it would. So let's continue, I guess. Okay, so this is interesting. So who wrote it? Okay, so this article was written by an expert on the online science consulting company, that one. As with all of their activities, the exact identity of the author will not be revealed, similarly to the MST report, blah, 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 blah. So basically, we won't know, and it's done by this fella. So essentially, this excuse me, this report is written anonymously by essentially some kind of industry or some kind of company that's done this. So he's essentially hired somebody. That's fine. Okay. There was only one author, and for simplicity in this explanation, I'll use the first person pronouns. Okay. So this is all pointless, to be honest. This is just context. Okay, but this is important. Dream commissioned this report and provided direct feedback, but not a co-author. That's very important. So that means that Dream did not tamper this in any way. I think we can trust this because it's done by an outside source. So I can believe that. So at least we now know that Dream did not tamper this in any way and that it is 100% legit. Or at least, yeah, it's legit. Okay, so this is the goals of the document. So number one is arguing that Dream Speedrun should be reinstated. Yeah, actually, I believe he should be reinstated. He's been so pivotal and such a big member of the community that I think he should, regardless. Dream has expressed to me that he is not concerned about his leaderboard position and is more concerned about the perception of his character. Yeah, that's fair enough. And to be honest, I just... For me, the illusion hasn't been burst because I still believe that he is one of the best players to ever play the game. So I will completely support him for whatever he does, completely, either as a fan or whatever I can do. You know, I will believe him no matter what. I think he should be reinstated because he's done so much for this community, so much for the speedrunning side, and he's also held the world record 2 times, so why shouldn't he? Right, number 2 says proving evidence or speculation that the Minecraft speedrunning team report was biased, although its accuracy is assessed. Well, we kind of knew it was biased. It even admitted it was biased from the start. Number 3, investigating the MST report. Discussion of code analysis. Oh, that's the bit that I was like, oof. Though the author is an expert in these aspects, the code of code analysis as well, looking into this was not a goal of the document. Hey. Oh, continues down here. A brief per usual. suggests that the section is accurate. I will assume that the numbers that are supposed to be random are truly random. Okay, that's fine. To be honest, I don't know the first thing about code, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that. Okay, so finally we're going to head into some maths of 4.1. I think we're 4 pages in. Okay, so probability calculations are hard. They are incredibly challenging because we're talking such small numbers, and the slightest adjustment could change it so radically and could mean something so different. So they are incredibly challenging. There may not be one right way to do something. Yeah, that's also true. There is often more than one way to skin a cat, as the saying says. So it is easy to violate something hidden or unknown assumption. Yeah, that's true. There is room for healthy debate about different methods and results. A gold standard method in statistical analysis is known as forward modelling, which is used as simulation of events to study probabilities. The appropriateness and accuracy of forward modelling as a method is very difficult to question. Instead, the question should be about the fidelity of the forward model. How accurate does it describe the situation which actually leads to an observed data? That didn't make sense. I said that totally wrong. In practice, this is usually handled by comparing two different models by assessing which one has a higher fidelity. Ideally, compelling. Oh, this is getting really dull. Oh, I don't want to read this. Okay, most of the rules and laws and methods of statistics are basically shortcuts to the forward full modelling process. This is really dull. Using mathematical equations to run precise approximation simulations. Okay, so basically he's going to run some simulations to see what's going to happen and then get a really nice sort of p-value or some kind of equation that he can use that's more accurate. Okay. Oh, wow. 10 to the 5 to 10 to the 7 simulations. That is a lot. That is essentially 100,000. No, yeah, that's 100,000 to 10 million simulations. That's a lot. Okay, so now this is interesting. So I've just sort of ignored the rest of that because it got really dull. But it looks like he might be bringing up something that I brought up, and that is the inappropriateness of the binomial distribution. I said when I looked through the MST's report that the binomial expansion was completely wrong, and well, not completely wrong, but I believed it was the wrong way to go. So be interesting to see what they say about this and see if we were right, and it looks like I might be. So what do they say? In order to calculate an accurate probability, we first need to use a model with mathematical or Monte Carlo that captures as much of the actual process as possible. Let's consider when using interpals. The MST report proposes a model that each barter is fully independent and uses a binomial model to then calculate the probabilities aggregated across runs. However, in practice, Dream and other speedrunners will barter with piglins until they reach a desired number of pearls, typically 10 to 12. Yeah, that's fine. And will then immediately stop, leaving uncompleted. That is very, very true, actually, because if they've got gold, you're not going to wait for all the gold to be used up. Because if you've got 10 gold and you get the pearls in 5 gold, for instance, that you need, you're not going to wait for the next 5 gold to get done. Surely you're just going to leave, which means you're going to then If you then take only those 5 gold that you actually see, the data starts to get skewed because there was actually 5 other bits of gold or 5 other trades that just weren't seen. So we've actually only got 50% of the data rather than 100%, which will obviously skew it towards that. Because if it's so for instance, if it's a 1 in 2, I know it isn't, it's 5%. But if it's 50% to get something and you get all dropped in the first 5 out of 10, then but you don't get the next 5, so essentially you get the first 5 you get drops and the second 5 you don't. That's 50% still, because that's 5 get it, 5 don't. But because Dreams left, let's say for instance, you then believe that it's now 100% because you've actually only seen those 5 that have dropped rather than the next 5 which didn't. So that's obviously going to skew the data a lot. So that's a good point I believe they picked up there. Yeah, they've mentioned it here. Thus, any off-camera unluckiness actually has no bearing on any other chosen barter. For example, the fact that the previous barter was an ender pearl doesn't affect the probability of the next barter. Of course it doesn't. They're independent of each other. They don't. The ability to get one is not impacted by the next. That's not how it works. But the fact that the previous barter was an ender pearl does affect how many barters are made. That is true, because once you get further and further down, the more pearls you get, the less barters you're going to do. Because it makes sense, because you're not going to wait for them all to get done. As soon as you get the number of pearls you need, 10 to 12, then you're going to go. You're not going to stay. Okay, so now they've gone on to say about... Okay, so here's 2 simulations they've done. So the barter stopping simulation, stop bartering after receiving 10 to 12 pearls. So I think that's what they've done. And then the binomial simulation, every barter is identical and the number of barters made is independent of the outcome of other barters. So that's really what they should have done. And also they should also incorporate all barters, but that's kind of hard, because how would you know? Then we get started into some interesting problems, like how would you know what's dropped and when and how and all this other stuff that you just... The problem is, if you don't show it on camera, you're not gonna truly know. So okay, so now we've got a graph. Wonder if I can just get it all in. Kind of. Okay, so we've got basically the 2 simulations I just said here, the barter stopping simulation and the binomial. So you can see that the probability with the barter stopping simulation is considerably higher. So it's much higher up here, which to me is better, I think, because essentially that's saying that because of the higher fidelity and it's more accurate. So I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, so now it's time to move on to 6.2, which is the probability evaluation of ender pearls. And I do apologize for this. This is awfully dry. I'm incredibly bored. I really don't want to do any more of this. Am I going to leave this in? I don't know. Okay, so note that there is one case at the end of the second stream where 12 gold are bartered for 5 sets of ender pearls. Some data collections suggest that 4 sets of ender pearls were obtained. Either way, this is obviously a low probability event in any case, and assigned this to barter shopping versus binomial probabilities can make an order of magnitude difference in result. Arguably, Barter stopping should not apply in this case, even though it's possible Dream stopped trading once he's successful. This case thus is modelled with the binomial probability. Okay, so I kind of get what that's saying. Ugh. It is far too late to be doing this. What am I doing with my life? Okay, now on to what is probably the most exciting bit for both me and you. It's time for the conclusion. If you're asking about the hypothesis that Dream was using modifications for the 6 streams in question, then the end of pole barter was 3 times 10 to the minus 3 to 3 times 10 to the minus 9. Depending on how you implement the stopping criterion, let's choose 10 to the minus 10, and Blaze Rod 1 we're not worried about. Combining these two probabilities gives you that, so 1.2 times 10 to the minus 16. Adding in the correction or multiplying for 100,000 possible sets of 11 streams to investigate in 1,000 different ways gives you 10 to the minus 8, or 1 in 100. Okay, that's interesting. So essentially they've allowed for the different possible sets of Ender Pearl, I believe, once he's left. So I believe that's what they've incorporated into there. So obviously it's never going to be a perfect system because it just never will. Apologies if you just heard my mic moved, nearly fell off, whoops. But anyway, what they're saying is they're trying to incorporate all the trades after Dream had left the screen. So that's what that 100,000 is, because there's 100,000 possible different sets and there's across 11 streams. So that then reduces it to 1 in 100, which is quite significant if you ask me. Okay, so even in the worst case, the probabilities are not so extreme as to completely rule out any chance that Dream use the modified probabilities if you have independent high probability reasoning to suppose that the game was modified by Dream before his final 6 runs. Then the low probability of that hypothesis, even after correcting for other biases, suggests an alternative explanation. There are reasonable explanations for Dream's Ender Pearl and Blade Rod probabilities, potentially including extreme luck, but the validity and probability of those explanations depends on explanations beyond the scope of this document. One alternative explanation is that Dream intentionally or unintentionally cheated, though I disagree that the situation suggests that this is an unavoidable conclusion. In any case, the conclusion of the MST report, that is at best 1 in 7.5 trillion chance that Dream did not cheat, is too extreme for multiple reasons that have been discussed in this document, and I believe we're done. Okay, this is what, this isn't code. That is terrible. Oh, I don't like that. Oh, I'm scared. I don't like any of that. Okay, so that's it. I'll leave it on this page. enjoy this code that I thoroughly don't understand at all. Anyway, time to give my conclusion, I guess. So this document, I think, is designed to try and counteract the previous document, the MST one, and it does just that. That's what it does. So it doesn't outright say Dream did not cheat, but what it does is say that, look, this 1 in 7.5 trillion is ridiculous number. It's this number instead. I believe they said it was 1 in 100 instead, or 10 to the minus 8, which is 1 in 10 million. So basically, instead of saying Dream did not cheat, they're saying MST are completely wrong in their numbers, and what they've done is just outrageous. And just remember what I said at the start of the video, that if a tree falls but nobody is around to hear it, does it still make a sound? The answer is yes. Of course it does. Just because you don't see something happen doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And that's what I believe that this document is saying. It's saying, look, we understand that Dream has had some extremely good luck, but you need to take certain factors into account as well, such as the unseen bartering trades, which I thought was a very interesting point, because it's very true, because you may not see all the more unlucky ones because he just leaves. You don't see them. And that's what I was saying on the first one, that the MST team need to the MST team, they need to go away and do their own bartering trades and just see what numbers they get thrown out. Like that sort of thing needs to be we need to have that data so we can get a good idea of what's going on. So I must admit, I do quite like this document. I think it tackles the idea of Dreams cheating and just sort of puts it to one side, which is always really nice, and looks at it from the perspective of the average viewer and just says, look, these numbers are wrong, this is what it should be. So yeah, I do like this one. I do like this one a lot.